What is up, guys? It's Jira Bro back with another video. Today we're gonna be talking about the board configurations in Jira Data Center for both Kanban and Scrum projects. Now I want to say from the get-go, this is gonna be for both. This is gonna be only for the company managed projects because there are some things that I would like to discuss. So as you can see, I'm actually in my Kanban board, and there is actually a slight difference, of course, between Kanban and Scrum, because in Scrum you have the backlogs and you have the active sprints. In the Kanban, it's all about the continuous work, or mostly and simply put, is basically you just pile up the issues. You also need to make them ranked specifically based on their priority. But also in Kanban you can add the backlog as well, so the Kanban board can actually have the backlog as well. The very first thing that we are going to notice every time when you actually create your Kanban project, you're always going to have backlog selected for development, in progress, and done. So this is something that you're actually going to have. And also we're going to go with the first very difference between Kanban and Scrum is within the Kanban itself. You're going to have this release button in here, and it says 3 issues will be released from Kanban project. What actually this means that these issues that are basically in the done column, we can actually define these fixed versions, for example version 1, version 2, or version 3, where we can define them, where we can say, hey, these are the 3 issues that we can define, and we can basically say that these ones can actually be released. So if I say 1.0 and I click on release, okay, so it already exists. 2.0, alright, so versions created and they have been released successfully. And what actually happens in here is when you're actually done with this, they automatically are gone from your board once you actually release them. And this only happens to the Kanban boards in company managed projects. Okay, so this is the first thing. This is the second difference, if I can say, because this is going to be your basic workflow when you're creating your Kanban board. Alright, so let's head down in here. So what we have is, when it comes to the board in here, what we can actually do, we can copy this board if we want. We can configure this board, of course. We can create a board in company managed projects. When you're actually creating a board, you can create both Kanban and Scrum boards as well. So I'm gonna give an example in here. So when it comes to Kanban and Scrum, you're gonna have these 2 options, and basically in here you're gonna create a Kanban board or Kanban board with sample data. So if I click on this, you're gonna be given 3 options. Board, when the board that gets created and automatically creates a new project in here, board from an existing project, or board from an existing saved filter. Now most of the times when it comes to, in my case, I was actually creating a board from an existing saved filter. And why was this? Because when the migration was actually done, there were some of the boards that were not migrated. So what I had to do is actually I had to recreate the filter from my server. And to recreate that filter, of course, there were some things that were not really working in there, because it contains some script runner functions, and that really in cloud is not actually working. It was only working on the server, so we had to create it in another way. And usually I was doing this by using the save JQL filter. Now, what you can actually do, of course, is I'm gonna go with one of the example in here. So I'm gonna create a board in here that is going to be called data center board. Now the interesting thing is that you can create this board for both of the projects. So this means that I can create this board, and this board is going to be appearing both on Kanban, and this is going to be appearing on the Scrum project as well. So if I actually do this, now what happens in here is there is this data center board, and now what happens actually? So since this was actually created in the both of the projects, as you can see, it actually has inherited the to do, in progress, and done columns, and these columns are actually from your Scrum project. And the thing is that you can actually see in here are these issue keys that are included from the Kanban, and these are also the issue keys that are actually included from the Scrum project. What actually this means? This means that your board can contain multiple projects at once. So that means you can look at the both of the projects in here. And what you also can do, you can create a quick filter to actually pivot between these two boards. Now let me go back to my Kanban board right here, and let me go to my KP board. Now the first thing you're probably gonna ask, what is this red thing doing here? So I will get that into the moment. So now what we can actually do is we can, let's say, collapse all of the swim lanes or expand all of the swim lanes. So basically it's this, but doing everything in one swift motion. I can copy this board if I actually really want to copy this board. And now it says, well, this is a copy of a board. And I go back to the board, and this is the exact copy. And that is actually done pretty fast. So you can copy your boards just like this. Alright, so now, since we actually have most of these things, there is this hide the epic labels. So if you have something that is that has some epic labels in here, so epics that contain labels, so that is going to be hidden. And there is also this interesting thing that says print the cards. So you actually can really print out these cards and have them on the paper. And let's say, and this is actually pretty interesting, because let's say your team wants to actually work on the real, whiteboard or some kind of a board, and they want to put these issues in here, and they just want to, if everyone is in the same office, for example, you can just, let's say we're going to move this from here to here, for example. And you can actually print this out. It's really cool. Okay, so now when you configure your board, so these are the things that you're going to see. Alright, so when you're a Jira admin, basically you have access to anything. What do I mean by anything? I really mean by anything. This actually even means the private team managed projects, where in the private team managed projects, the only way for some users is actually to see them if someone actually invites you to that specific team managed project. So Jira admins can actually see that as well. So the very first thing that you actually have in here is going to be your board name. Now you can change that board name if you want, or if you don't, you can actually leave it as it is. You're going to be spending a lot of time in here defining the board administrators. And basically your board administrators are those who can actually access this configuration of the boards right here. So you can actually add multiple board administrator. This is really handy if someone who is a board administrator actually leaves the company and someone needs to take over. So you can actually change that. But the most important thing in here is going to be your filter, because the board itself is a visual representation of your filters. So as you can see, this filter right here, it has its own query, and this query is written in here. And as you can see, this query is actually the JQL query. So it says the project equals to KP ordered by and ranked by the ascending order. Most of the time when you're gonna be creating your Kanban board, this is gonna be your default. This is gonna be your default filter that is going to be created by you. Now, of course, you can create a new filter. You can adjust it however you actually want. You can save that filter, and then you can actually change it. If you go to edit the filter query, you can actually change this query, and you can, you know, really make it different. So if you go for the advanced right here, this is what you're gonna see. And what you can actually do in here is bulk change all 16 issues. So if I go here, you can change these issues. For example, you can change more of them. You can change their, you can change. So let's say we have these three. I'm gonna go next. So I can edit the issues, move them, transition them, archive them, watch them, stop watching them, or to delete them. So this is something that I can do if I have the bulk option. And this is more for of a search. And of course, you can always find your filters right here. You can just type in, for example, filter. You can search. Okay, so let's say KP, and this is what you see, filter for the board KP. You also have the popular filters, which are actually being here. There's also option for the my filter as well. Let's go back. Your session timed out. Okay, that's weird. All right. So this is something that you actually want to have, right? And if you don't want to use this filter, you're just gonna click on this drop down and select a new filter, and from that moment your board based on the filter is going to change. So that is something that you actually need to keep in mind. So if something is like, oh, my issue is not appearing on the board, the question is it appearing on, is it not appearing only for you? Do you also have checked the filter settings and the shares of the filters? So this actually means, let's say if for some reason the share and you were not part of the filters and you were not being shared with the filter needs to be adjusted so anyone can actually see. My recommendation is, when you're creating those filters for your users, make sure that only the ones who are within the project itself actually see those filters, unless there's some confidential information that not everyone should actually see, right? So we have two things in here. One of the filters sharing for a, let's say, specific group of people, so they can only see that. And in the future, if they want to have some confidential information that needs to be stored there, you can create a new issue type, call it a secret or something like that, and then apply something that is called the issue security scheme, but that is something, of course, different. Okay, edit filter shares. Okay, so there's some things that you actually need to know about this. By default, as you can see, the viewers are everyone within the project itself, and you can add the viewers in here, which is basically like, and in here it's going to be group, project, and any logged in user. On the cloud, it was kind of different because you can specify this by a user, by an organization, by a project, and also by a individual user. Now, if it's any logged in user, I don't want to recommend this, because that means anyone within your Jira site can actually have access to that board. And that is not something that is pretty advisable to do, because data security is at risk there. So you don't want to give anyone anything. Even though if your colleagues and if you're actually working, data security is there, and you just want to keep your private information for yourself, and also you have the right to do so. So this can be actually for the group, or this can be actually added for the project itself. And you can also define, if you want, and if you say I only want developers to be able to see that from the project ABC or something like that. This is something that you can do in here, which gives you additional power that you can do. Now, as you can see, for the editors, so basically the editors are the ones who can make any of the changes, and in here it is not shared. My also recommendation is to only give this to the ones that you're actually pretty sure, or if someone is actually going on the vacation, or if there is a certain change in the organization, some of the employees got laid off, or they're quit by themselves, and they're no longer the editors, so you have to adjust those editors as well. We talked about the queries, because board is based on a filter, and a filter is based on a query. Ranking. Now, actually, what ranking is nothing else, only this. So this is ranking. This is going to be your ranking. So it's going to be moving your issues up and down through your column. Okay? And the important thing is, now the question is, who can rank the issues? So the ranking issues are consisting of two permissions: edit issue permission and schedule issues permission. In order to do this, okay. So that is it. Now, projects in a board itself, and it says this is the Kanban project. And now if you go to view permission, it's gonna actually lead you to your actual permissions. And this is something, these are the additional differences between Kanban and Scrum. So for Kanban, we had the columns difference, we had the releases within the done column, and now what we also have are gonna be the sub-filters, and also to hide the completed issues older than 2 weeks, 1 week, or actually simply show them all if you want. So I can say, you know what, show it all. Why not? Okay, so now the question is, when I have the sub-filters, what sub-filters are helping me with? So this is further filtering of issues for unreleased work. So this is for the issues that are still not being released. But as you saw, when we have released them, actually they were gone from the board itself. So that is another difference that you actually need to know. Columns. A lot of time you're going to be spending in here. There are interesting things in here. So what you can actually do is you can add the columns, right? And each column is specified by the workflow status. So your workflow status are mapped with your board columns, and this is how they're actually being represented on your column, on your board, sorry. So the very first thing that you're actually going to be having here is this column constraint. Now you can choose to do not have any of the constraints. You can have this by the issue count, and you can select days in the column. So if you're actually curious for how many days some issue is actually within the column itself, because you want to monitor the work of your team, you can actually check this box. All right, in here it's also using the simplified workflow. All right, and it says the project administrator can add and remove statuses below. Who are the project administrators? The project administrators are nothing more or nothing less the users who have the administrator's project role within that project. Okay, right. And now the question is, well, who needs to add those project admins? Your answer is right there. Jira admins. That's correct. All right. So, what else do we have? And as you saw, what I was talking about was this Kanban backlog. So this actually means if you have some status in here, you can, let's say you can add a status and you can move that status to the backlog. So let's say I'm gonna add a status in here. It's gonna be in the to-do category. And I'm gonna say this, you know what, this is gonna be, let's say it's gonna be start. Now what this means, I can, from this screen, I can add and I can create a new status. And I'm gonna say add. And as you can see, in here, I don't have any mapped statuses, so these statuses are not containing any issues at all. But that is not my point. I only want to enable my Kanban backlog, right? So this is something that I've done, and we're gonna come back to that later. The thing is, what you actually see in here, so as you can see, these boxes right here, they're representing the constraints. Okay, so we don't have constraints in this column, no constraints in this column. We have one issue that has this one status. We have two issues, but what is actually saying in here, maximum constraint is 1, and that's why you saw on the board itself within the in progress that board was marked as red, because it is exceeding the amount of issues within this column right here. And then you have the done status, where we're actually setting the resolution. So what actually this resolution is, especially this means that automatically when you let me show you that. So selected from development, done. As you can see, when we go from the done, so we have the status of actually being done. So there is also a resolution that has been added to it. That resolution is also in done. Yeah, and as you can see right here, it's actually there is a strike through for this issue in here. So as you can see, the status is actually done. You can at any time you can view the workflow if you would like to see that. But there is actually something else that we have. Okay. So as you can see, you can view the workflow, and this is how the workflow looks. And as you can see, this is our status in here that we have added, the start status. As you can see, I can move this from done to start if I actually want to do this. Alright, so we can go to the history, and as you can see, that I have made changes. The resolution, new resolution is done. Okay. And these numbers right here, those are the IDs. So don't get confused about that. Alright, so bigger and better backlogs. So this means that even in my Kanban board, I have backlogs, right? Where I can actually specify which of the issues will how can I actually organize this better. The difference is there is no scope creep when you actually add the issues from to the backlog. There are no scope creeps at all, and that is actually something that is interesting, right? So you might also be confused in here. So I have these two backlogs in here. This one is the status. So I add my issues here, and I say backlog, right? So it has been added in here. Even if I go to my Kanban backlog, it's right here. But what if I put it here? Now it's appearing right here. So I can rank within my backlog as well. And I can be like, oh, this is how it looks like, right? So this is, yeah, of course, if you want to have the Kanban within your backlog. Let's go back to the configuring once more. Epics panel. So this is if you want to add your epics. Swim lanes. So in swim lanes, basically this is how you actually group your issues. So as you saw, expedite, in here it says priority, and in here it says status. Let me say here, I want to say issue type, and I want to go with story. And I'm going to say stories. Okay, and I'm going to click on add. So if I go back to my board right now, I don't have any stories. Okay, that's why it's not being shown. Let me go with bug. Yep, let me go with bug. Let me go back. As you see right now, well, instead of stories, I have to name this bugs. Yep, and now, and as you can see, it's kind of lined up like the real swim lanes. Of course, all of you have been on the swimming pool, and you all saw how the swim lanes are actually looking like. But if you don't want to have any swim lanes, you can switch them off. You can base the swim lanes on queries, on stories, assignees, epics, projects, and no swim lanes at all. Quick filters. Quick filters are pretty good because, as you saw, I was creating that board where I have specified that I have created the filter, and I have specified that filter needs to be located in the two projects. Then this means I can say, you know what? I want to be looking what is happening on my Scrum board as well. The question is, well, can I actually do this? I can say Scrum project, and I can type in project equals Scrum project. Let me just go SP. Yep. Let me just add it in here. If I go back, here is where your quick filter will appear. When I click on this, it's not going to be showing anything. Why? Because it has different columns, and they're not being shown, right? So that's why you're not seeing anything in here. But you can add a lot of things, and quick filters are only based on JQL. So yes, you have to know JQL. Card colors, you can base your card colors, so this can be like more visual appealing. Let's say for the bugs, you want to say this is gonna be your red story, this is gonna be your greenish, and task, it's gonna be your blue. And when I go back, and as you can see, this is how it's being distinguished, this right here. Of course, there was this one app that basically colors the whole the whole card. Now on the cloud, it's not possible to have that, because basically there is no app like that anymore. I mean, there was, but it wasn't working like it was intended to work, like on the server itself. Alright, what else do we have? We have the card layouts. What actually this means? This means if I add, let's say, assignee, if I add issue type, for example, and if I add the reporter, and go back to my board, should be able to see more information in here. A backlog. Oh, okay. So this is how it actually shows in the backlog. This is the representation of it. Let me go back here and let me go for the Kanban board. Now let's say creator, and I'm gonna say issue type. Go back. As you can see, these are some of the additional things that you can add to your, well, it's card. So cards, issues, however you want to call it, you can just add it. You also have for the working days that you can define, and you can define non-working days. Issue detail view, this is really something if you want to change or not. My recommendation is not to touch this, because I really haven't used it, and to me there was no much of